Hello and welcome to the RedMars Podcast. This is an impromptu video podcast today where I want to talk about something that's really cool that I actually just read about. We're talking about wireless energy transmission. So it's going to be a quicker podcast. We just have the one story, but it kind of relates to some other information I was talking about previously, and a scientist of mine that I hold very close to my heart because he has some super kind of out there ideas, definitely sci-fi at the time. I mentioned this in my last podcast, Nikola Tesla. So his ideas of wireless transmission of power and electricity, he proved this. He did this with high voltage. He was able to power lights around his I think it was his house, where he had these lights placed around his house, and they were all powered through this wireless technology that he had. And you can see things like the Tesla Tower on demonstrations of this. It's readily available online. But the story I want to talk about today is about this company that we have up on our screen here, and that is Starcatcher. So Starcatcher is an interesting company in the fact that they're looking at wirelessly transmitting energy to different, systems here on Earth, in space, in orbit, beyond, using the sun. So think of it capturing the solar arrays, focusing them, and then distributing that power where needed. So they did a demonstration on Friday where they actually harnessed the solar energy and then projected that at different solar arrays here on Earth. So their capture device was here on Earth, and it dispersed that about 90 meters. It was at the NFL football field, home of the Jaguars here in Florida, Jacksonville area. And the reason this is so fascinating is because the idea of wireless power transmission is actually not new. This goes back to the ancient times, back in ancient Egypt. And while this isn't a proven theory, more research keeps coming up suggesting that this was the reason for them. And again, bringing us back to Nikola Tesla, he actually believed that this is what the ancient pyramids of Giza and all that were actually used for. They were energy systems or devices used to project energy into Earth's orbit and beyond. And the idea of, hey, maybe there were aliens or spacecraft, that kind of bring us in a whole other topic about the ancient Egyptians. But there was thought that these chambers inside the pyramids would create this radio wave or microwave transmission that would then project that into orbit and would be able to charge batteries or spacecraft and stuff like that in orbit, so that kind of Earth was used as this charging ground. Think of it, a electric plug-in for your intergalactic Tesla, and it allows you to fly around. So scientists, specifically Nikola Tesla, were extremely interested in this technology and the ancient pyramids. And even today, we just have new studies through this LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar systems that are able to now look deeper and say, hey, maybe there's more to the pyramids than what we originally thought, which brings us back to this wireless power transmission. So let's look through Starcatcher's website here to get a better understanding of who they are and what they're planning to do. So when you go to their website, first thing you read here is Starcatcher is creating the first energy grid for space. Our orbital infrastructure will transform how satellites are powered, spacecraft connect to the network, and receive energy via existing solar arrays. This requires no retrofit to utilize. That is huge. All these providers or companies that provide satellite infrastructure don't need to upgrade their systems. They can use their existing infrastructure, just using now Starcatcher's new technology to provide them power when they need it. Really, it's that focused beam of sunlight to those solar arrays anywhere in orbit on the Earth. Now, they're going to do this in a interesting pay-as-you-go method is kind of what they're looking at. It says, power will be provided on a pay-as-you-go model, with Starcatcher owning and operating the network of power satellites to provide energy to spacecraft anywhere in low Earth orbit. It's actually really genius, because as long as the sun continues burning, they will have an energy source to not only power their satellites, but all their customers at no extra cost outside of the infrastructure themselves that they have to put up there. So obviously getting things into space is expensive and all that, but you're not burning coal, you're not burning fossil fuels, you're not using different types of fuels, whether that's ion propulsion or anything like that. You're really just using the sun. So it's super fascinating. So let's see what they have here. So space energy to supply-demand gap. Projected number of satellites in orbit by 2030, 50,000. So they're going to build this kind of mesh solar power providing infrastructure in space that allows them to power all these different satellites and customers like that maybe don't get power depending on their orbit or where they are in their orbit, or on the moon. Maybe somebody's on the dark side of the moon and they need power, or they need some sort of way to keep their lunar rovers warm, and instead they have a shorter lifespan. Well, this could open that up and extend lifespans by providing them, the solar power they need and possibly heat. The solar energy provides heat that could keep these different landers and whatnot operational longer, if not indefinitely. So that's super exciting. Then they say 840 million watts needed to power satellites annually. They're going to cover that. And the total watts today in orbital production is 40 million. So that's 800 more million of watts is going to be needed to power those satellites annually. So we need a better way to stay in orbit. So that means lower mission costs, shift CapEx to OpEx, and improve capabilities. So I haven't heard too much about this company up till today when I was reading this article about them, and just thought this was super fascinating and had to bring it up with everybody here who listens. So that's what brings us with this impromptu news update for all the listeners here on the RedMars Podcast. So again, if you're listening to this, appreciate it. And I hope you find this interesting. This is really what I want to share with all the listeners and watchers here is what's going on in the world today and what technologies exist. And this is one of those technologies I think that is absolutely incredible that you think sci-fi, and here we are again today. So perhaps this is something that is actually from the past that existed back in ancient times. So I won't go through the entirety of the Starcatcher website. Just wanted to do a shorter video here, but really get those who were interested or maybe driving home or whatnot that were interested in this kind of stuff, just some information on it. So we'll kind of go through here a bit. Pay-as-you-go power or whatnot. So this brings me back to Nikola Tesla. So I got another tab here I'm opening up. For those that are listening, this is on the Nikola Tesla part of this. And for those watching, you'll get to see what we're talking about here. So why Nikola Tesla was obsessed with the Egyptian pyramids. So this is what I mentioned. This is an article that goes into the details of Nikola Tesla's fascination with wireless electricity. And again, the reason this never happened, it was actually proposed back in his time. I believe this image is from 1899. So it was probably around that time frame. But he proposed the idea of building these Tesla towers that would be able to power communities and larger through wireless transmission of power. Now, the problem came, and this is, as I mentioned in the last one, always comes down to this: who's going to pay for it and how do you regulate it? It's the same thing with cryptocurrencies. If you can't regulate it, how do people get rich off it? Well, that was a similar problem here. It was, if you have this wireless power, how do you prevent people from tapping into it and getting power for free? Well, Nikola Tesla was an avid believer of you shouldn't be charging for the forces of nature. That's for everyone to enjoy. And so that was a big, controversy with him and all the people that funded him and his research, is he didn't believe that was how we should go about things. So that brings us to the Egyptian pyramids and where their locations are. And we'll kind of just read this one paragraph here. I can link this in the chat, or for those watching, the link is from bigthink.com, and just do a search on there for Nikola Tesla and you should come across this. But yeah, let me read this portion to you here. It's got a nice picture of the Tesla Tower as well. For those that are watching, you can get a better understanding of what this looked like. Think of a water tower, but a skeleton of one in the top looks like this kind of broken down just skeleton of where the water would sit in like in a dome kind of shape, and that's where the electricity would radiate from. So here we go. So it wasn't just the shape of the Egyptian pyramids, but their location that created their power, according to Tesla. He built a tower facility known as the Tesla Experimental Station in Colorado Springs and Wardenclyffe Tower, or Tesla Tower, on the East Coast that sought to take advantage of the Earth's energy field. The locations were chosen according to the laws of where the pyramids of Giza were built, related to the relationship between the elliptical orbit of the planet and the equator. The design was intended for wireless transmission of energy. So that's the fascinating thing about this. The more and more we learn about these pyramids, where they're located, how they were built, the chambers inside of them, and as we do ground penetrating radar around them and can go deeper into the earth, we learn so much more about what they could have been. Now, we have no proof that they were actually used for these yet, but I think as the years go on and more people look at these topics or this research, they'll be able to better understand what went on back in the day. So super fascinating. I definitely want to go and take a trip to Egypt one day so I can really go through and see this for myself. I think it's super fascinating. All right, so one last part here. So another aspect of Tesla's thinking reportedly related to numerology, Tesla was, by many accounts, an unusual individual. For those that don't know Nikola Tesla, absolutely, and by today's kind of understanding, we would definitely say very OCD. He spent times in his hotel room where, unfortunately, would be the last of his days, rearranging furniture so that things looked right, and it drove him crazy that it wasn't level. And he was able to notice this. But let's continue on here. So Tesla, as I mentioned, an unusual individual with obsessive qualities. One such obsession were the numbers 3, 6, 9, which he believed were the key to the universe. He would drive around buildings 3 times before going in or stay in hotels with numbers divisible by 3. He made other choices in sets of 3. Some believe Tesla's obsession with these numbers connected to his preference for the pyramidal shape and the belief that there was some fundamental mathematical law and ratios that were part of a universal math language. As we don't know precisely how the pyramids were built and why, they are looked at by some of the creations that many either generating energy or serving deliberately installed as messengers or even code from ancient civilizations. So I definitely believe they were used for kind of a combination of all of that. So if you can transmit power, there's no reason why you can't encode data in that power and so on. Now, again, we don't know what they were used for. I'm not going to dive too much into this podcast here. But again, just wanted to kind of talk through this and read through some of this articles for those that are interesting. And I just thought it was very fascinating, yesterday or whichever, the last podcast there, talking about power and wireless power and Nikola Tesla, and then this coming up, talking about different spacecraft and spacecraft of the future. This is one of those technologies I didn't mention in terms of powering spacecraft remotely using technologies like this, where you could ultimately, really, like a solar sail or something like that, provide electricity or solar energy to those spacecraft in orbit and beyond, and really give them this unprecedented energy to keep them going. So were the pyramids used for that? No idea. Could they have been? Absolutely. Theories behind it support it. They are oriented in a way that also supports this. Again, won't go too much into detail, but the information is out there. Look up for different chambers and microwave technology and stuff like that. And perhaps Starcatcher can go beyond just the solar radiation or solar power for energizing spacecraft in orbit and different constellations, and really any infrastructure here on Earth as well that needs solar arrays. Maybe during night hours, we can provide 24/7 round the clock energy to those solar arrays here on Earth as well, which would be quite interesting in terms of harnessing the energy of the sun. But maybe they'll take that another step farther in the future and look at how do we now use the same technology to transmit microwaves. That could be a step closer to what the pyramids were possibly used for as well, and power different types of spacecraft in orbit and beyond, and get us our intergalactic star fleet of Starcatcher technology. Super interesting, and definitely encourage those that are listening, go check this out later, and let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think that the pyramids were used for intergalactic space or spacecraft, or alien life forms used the ancient pyramids for charging their spacecraft, or maybe data communication, or maybe none of that at all? Who knows? But definitely wanted to bring it up, and props to Starcatcher for making this technology one step closer and getting us there. So that's all I have for you folks today. Just wanted to do this quick video and talk about what I read about and why I think it's fascinating. So for all those out there, remember, stay curious, keep looking up, let me know in the thoughts, follow along, subscribe, and I will talk to you all later. Take care, everyone.